Welcome to Anti-Woke and Autistic. If you think you've heard it all when it comes to fat acceptance and the promotion and celebration of obesity, you're very mistaken. Wait till you hear this. You just won't believe it.
So I've been thinking about taking a solo vacation. And a lot of people are like, oh, you're gonna get murdered or kidnapped. Well, my friends, being fat has its perks. You wanna kidnap me? Try picking me up and throwing me over your shoulder. You wanna bury my body? You gotta dig a big ass hole, okay? You wanna shove my body into a suitcase? It better be a big ass suitcase. I'm an inconvenience to murder or kidnap. Being fat has its perks, guys.
All right, first of all, am I the only person who thinks she sounds like she's breathing soup? She was actually getting winded, out of breath, just talking. If ever there was an outrageous reason to want to stay fat or celebrate being fat, it's because you're harder to kidnap. Now, there is some truth to that. There is a little bit of truth. But you're much more likely to suffer life-threatening illnesses as a result of obesity than get kidnapped if you're thin. I'm going to repeat that. You are much more likely to suffer the consequences of obesity. That includes chronic pain, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular problems, stroke, blood clots, infertility, miscarriages, developing diabetes during pregnancy, back pain, osteoarthritis of the knees, obstructive sleep apnea, getting cancer because you were obese. You're more likely to suffer all of that than you are to get kidnapped if you were thin. I've been watching true crime for many, many, many years. I'm a big fan, huge fan of true crime. I could talk about it for hours and hours as a result of watching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows about true crime, homicides, real life homicides and whatnot. I consider myself an expert in all sorts of aspects of homicide and murders. And one of the facts, and this fact is very well known among detectives, among experts in the field of criminology, it's easily found on Google, you could easily find this information, is that the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of murder victims knew their attacker, they knew their killer, the overwhelming majority. Now, if this fat woman thinks that when she travels, she's going to be safe because she's fat, the chances of her getting kidnapped while she's traveling, if she were thin, would be astronomically small in the first place. So it's a relativity issue. She's less likely to get kidnapped if she's humongous when compared to if she were 120 pounds. She's correct. However, you have to put this into context. What are the odds that when a woman is traveling alone and she's thin, she's going to get kidnapped? Now, it depends on where you go. Obviously, if you go to popular tourist sites and countries where there's just a lot of tourism, like France, Italy, just a lot of places like that, it's very unlikely that even a 90-pound woman would get kidnapped. It's just unlikely. And then when they do, if it's a big case like the Natalie Holloway case, yeah, it makes a lot of news. So it creates the impression that, oh, it's so dangerous for women to travel alone. But the big picture is that it's very unusual for a woman to get kidnapped by a stranger while she's traveling popular travel destinations, vacation destinations. Now, if she goes to some place like Mexico or the Middle East or something like that, yeah, she increases her chances. And if she's fat, it's going to be even less likely that she'll get kidnapped. So what this woman is saying here is true, but within a highly specific context. Therefore, it should not be considered when a fat woman goes traveling or when a fat woman is trying to come up with reasons to stay fat. If ever there was a ridiculous, outrageous reason to either stay fat or celebrate obesity or glorify being huge, it's this idea that kidnappers won't look at you even once. The vast majority of kidnap victims who become murdered know their attacker. The attacker is almost always a boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend, a husband, an estranged husband, an ex-husband. In other cases, say, sometimes the attacker is a woman. Maybe a woman hires a man to kill her, but the victim knows or knew the killer. The second thing she's not considering is that in the vast majority of cases in which the killer does not know the victim, the first time the victim sees the killer is when the killer is killing her when she's moments away from being assaulted lethally. In cases like that, he almost always doesn't transport the body somewhere. The killers who transport the body, like they load the body into a car or they load the body into the bed of a pickup and then they drive it somewhere and find a place to bury it or dump it, toss it in a body of water. In almost every one of those cases, the victim knew the killer. When the victim does not know the killer, it's usually a case where right after he kills her, he flees. He's not interested in transporting the body, let alone burying it. He flees. He might force his way into her house and kill her there. He flees. Forces his way into her apartment, kills her, flees. Or he pulls a gun and scares her into a submissive position and rapes her somewhere, then shoots her dead to eliminate her, reporting him to the police, shoots her. I mean, if she's 350 pounds, a bullet in her chest is still gonna almost kill her or leave her in a very incapacitated state. He might shoot her in the head. He might shoot her several times. I mean, if he wants to kill her and she's 350 pounds, that actually might motivate him to shoot her 4 or 5 times to make sure he gets the job done. He's going to flee. He's going to run. He's going to take off. But that is frequently the case when a stranger kills a woman. If he wants to kill her, if the opportunity is there, a lot of rapes and killings are opportunities, crimes of opportunity. There's nobody around. The woman looks vulnerable. And looking vulnerable isn't always a function of size, small stature. You could look vulnerable and be morbidly obese. You could look as tough as nails and be thin. There's a lot of factors, a lot of variables that go into, okay, should I go after this woman? A predator weighs his pros and cons when he's searching for a victim. He just doesn't randomly choose a victim just because he doesn't have a beard. So if he's hell-bent on raping a woman and a vulnerable-looking victim right at the right time is fat, if he has a knife or a gun, he's going to use those weapons to frighten her, to scare her. He might just ambush her. Now, it's more difficult for him to drag her into an alley, but a lot of it depends on where the rape occurs. It could occur inside his car. It could occur inside a motel. It could occur inside her apartment. And if he's hell-bent on killing her, he's going to do it with a gun or a knife. Can a fat woman fight back more effectively than a thin woman? Well, it depends. If she figures out a way to get on top of him and smother him, but there are fat murder victims. There are fat female murder victims. Now, many people wonder, well, what rapist would want to rape a fat woman? You need to educate yourself. You need to get educated. Rape is not a crime of passion. It is not a crime of physical attraction to the victim. It might seem like it is, depending on the circumstances. He asks her out. She turns him down. He rapes her, kills her. But the bottom line is rape is a crime of hatred towards women, evil towards women, power over women, domination and control over women. Hatred. I mean, fury and rage towards women. This is well documented. This is why old ladies get raped. It's why sometimes a rape victim is covered from head to toe in baggy clothes. Sometimes a rape victim is unconscious in a nursing home, in a coma, in a vegetative state. Yes, there are rape victims in nursing homes. Rape has nothing to do with being physically attractive, has nothing to do with, it really has nothing to do with size, because a rapist is evil. He's got a rage against women, and so he's looking for opportunity. He's looking for a chance to, number one, get away with it. There's nobody else around. Number two, surprise the woman, ambush her, sneak up on her. Does she look easily intimidated? A woman could be 6'2" and 300 pounds and have a look about her that makes her seem easily submissive, easily intimidated. A woman who's 5'4" and 120 pounds could have something about her that comes across as, wow, she looks tough. Better not mess with that one. Size doesn't matter sometimes. When it comes to heart disease and type 2 diabetes and a lot of other medical conditions, yes, size matters. But when it comes to looking like a victim or looking like a potential victim to a predator, size doesn't matter unless you're like 4 feet tall and 60 pounds, or 6'10" and 400 pounds. But when you get right down to it, this woman is right when she says it's more difficult to bury a fat body. However, a lot of killers don't even bury thin victims. They just dump the body somewhere, being stupid enough to think nobody will ever find the body. Or if they think somebody might find the body, they don't think the crime will ever be traced back to them. There are many. I have watched docudramas in which there are many cases in which a lightweight woman was not buried. She was just dumped somewhere. And you got to remember, when the killer doesn't know the victim, he's much, much less likely to be interested in transporting the body somewhere and looking for a place to discard it, let alone bury it. The people who do that almost always know the victim. So if this fat woman is traveling, she's going to be around a lot of strangers. It is very unlikely she'd be attacked as a tourist in a relatively safe place to take a vacation. If somebody is hell-bent on killing her, not necessarily for rape, but for theft, they want to rob her, they want to steal her jewelry, they see she's wearing something expensive or she looks like she's carrying a lot of money, those predators are likely to have a weapon. Now, this woman here may be difficult to transport around when she's dead and may require a big-ass hole to be buried in, but that doesn't mean she wouldn't freeze with fear if some little guy pulled out a gun on her. Or maybe he ambushes her and demands her money. She sees that big knife, she's already been cut, she's bleeding, maybe he has a gun, maybe there's more than one man. She hands over the money, then they pop her, they kill her, and they flee. Again, doesn't matter how big she is, because they don't have any intentions of bringing the body somewhere and discarding it somewhere. The people who do that usually know the victim. I have watched hundreds and hundreds of true crime. There are many cases in which a thin woman is not buried. She is left at the primary crime scene. She's left there by the killer. And there are cases in which the victim is fat. Now, I don't offhand recall a case where a man picked up a 280-pound woman, lifted her up, and tossed her into the back of his pickup. I don't offhand recall a case like that, but I know that there are cases in which fat women have been killed. Look at it this way. There are men who are victims of crime. Men who may be husky. They may be 6 feet tall, 180, 190, 200. Men are victims of crime. They're victims of murder. Men get murdered all the time. They don't necessarily get put in a truck, driven around, hauled out of the truck, dragged around, and just dumped somewhere or buried somewhere or tossed over a barricade into a lake. A lot of times when a man is killed, he's just left there. So when a woman feels safe because she's fat, she's getting pretty much ahead of herself. She has to remind herself that men who are on average a lot heavier and bigger than women get murdered, and they don't necessarily get buried. Yes, it's more difficult to drag around a fat woman than it is a thin woman. And as I said before, you have to put that into context. If a man wants to kill this woman, he's going to do it. And the only way she can defeat him is if she knows how to fight, if she's trained in boxing, if she has some kind of athleticism or background, martial arts, karate, whatever, self-defense training. One thing is for sure, she's going to be disabled when it comes to trying to run away. It's going to be harder for her to run away from a predator than if she were 100 pounds lighter. Another thing she's failing to consider is that a kidnapper might think a fat woman is the ideal victim because he knows a fat woman's going to have a hard time escaping. Sometimes you gotta climb over something to escape, or you gotta fit through a small opening or squeeze through a tight opening to escape, and then you've gotta run, especially if the kidnapper took your shoes and you gotta run in bare feet. Imagine a 300-pound woman pulling all of that off. A kidnapper is gonna know, hey, it might not be real easy to hoist her around or drag her around, but man, once we get her, once we have her held hostage, she's going to have a real heck of a time escaping. Women, if you want to feel safe when you travel, don't don't get ahead of yourself and think you're not going to get attacked. You're going to be immune to getting attacked just because you're fat. Even if you're very tall and fat, don't assume. You don't know what's in the mind of a predator you just happen to cross paths with. He could be on drugs. He's not thinking about how big or small you are. He has a knife, he has a gun. If you want to feel safe, learn martial arts, learn self-defense, learn preemptive self-defense, meaning where you shouldn't go, what you shouldn't do to look vulnerable. Don't appear lost or unsure of yourself if you're a tourist. Don't walk around at night by yourself. Always make sure you have a ride arranged by a trustworthy person. Don't accept rides from strangers. Oh, don't get me started on that. Being difficult to be dragged around and requiring a big ass hole to be buried is absolutely no excuse to stay fat. It is absolutely no excuse to glorify obesity. These fat acceptance women are desperate to come up with any reason they could grasp onto to justify fat acceptance. One more reason to celebrate obesity. It's hard to kidnap me. That's insanity. Lose weight. Become physically fit. Become strong from working out. Learn to run fast. Learn to jump and run and hop and leap. Learn to throw punches and kicks. Learn how to use a gun or a weapon that's legal to carry around like pepper spray. Don't do stupid things that could get you murdered, and you'll be a lot safer than the woman who's 7 feet tall and 500 pounds. That is my video for today. Have an incredible day.